Morning, everyone.
Morning. I'll come online in a little bit.
No problem. Hey, Hiba, how are you?
Great. And you?
Good.
Everyone?
Hello. Hey, Paul, how are you doing? Oh, I think. There we go. Stacy, how are you doing? All right. So Hiba, you're getting all ready for India?
I want to talk to you today.
Sure.
Because we have,
We'll chat
at the
later.
end of the session, I wanted
No
just
problem.
to,
Yeah. All right. So we will go ahead and get started. I'll just share my screen. Some reason the computer is freezing a little bit today, but okay. All right. Avantika is just joining us. Hey, Avantika, how are you?
Hey, hi everyone.
Hey, we're just getting started. So just wanting to, as always, review our culture that we're bringing to this group. Our full presence is always appreciated. Second is respect for all those that have joined us with various opinions and being from different parts of the world, cultures and backgrounds. And the third is the determination to do the work that is being asked of us. And as always, we will review our two practices for developing humility. The first is the two things we should always remember. So what good others have done for us. And the second is what bad we have done, maybe have done for others. And this is really to keep us in the space of always wanting to try to improve and be better. And the two things we should always try to forget is the feelings that have come when people have done bad unto us. And second, what good we have done for others. So I will just go ahead and start with, as usual, our invocation to bring, to offer respects to all those that have joined and our teachers. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangu Langete Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sunda Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. All right, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining. As always, we're offering respects to all our teachers and to all of you for joining us. So thank you again for joining us. I really look forward to this every week in my week. So again, thank you again for coming. Does everyone recall? So I'm just going to do a quick like casting the light on where we have been. So remember that from 2 weeks ago, we're in this chapter now talking about karma yoga. And so really we're getting at the three elements, if you remember the three elements of skill and action, right? And so we talked about the first of those two skills last week, which was being true to our own nature and what it looks like sometimes when we're not true to our nature. We talked about that last week. And then this week, we're going into letting go of the fruits of our actions. And then the third element that we'll be getting into is making our work an offering. So just to, if people want to, just to recall, these are two really important verses that come up in this section of the of the Bhagavad Gita. Again, I'm just quoting usually from this version. It's by Ranchor Prime. It's a really nice version to read for simplicity, and one that you can really pick up and explain to everyone, because the author here, he wrote it for his children. And so this verse 247 goes like, if you have the right to work but not to its results, do not be attached to the fruits of work or not working. So if you remember, Simon, he brings this up in we'll read specific parts from the chapter, but this is brought up right at the beginning. And if people remember, this was this section where he's talking about, if you remember, for those that have read this chapter, he's on a bus and he's trying to get to the airport. And we've all been in that situation where the traffic's not moving, he needs to get somewhere, and he's just really stressed out about it. And so this was one of the first main verses that reflects on this chapter, on the section of letting go of the fruits. The second one is right in the next verse. So work with a spirit of detachment, being equal to success or failure. Such evenness of mind is called yoga. So we wanted to just start out right out in our breakout rooms and discuss this question is, what does letting go of the fruits mean to you? And can we revisit an experience in life that genuinely captures this letting go? So we want to try to, see where we're at with this element of letting go. I think it'll be a really interesting conversation to hear from all of us, where we may have experienced this. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, if people, I'll also share the question in the chat group, but I think it'd be nice to also chat together. So I'm just going to quickly break us up and then we'll go from there. So hey Rita, how are you? It's been a little while. It's good to see you.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Good to be here. Hi, everyone.
We have 2, 4, 6. Okay. All right, so there we go. We have our, so if you want to just see, there's the rooms, and then I'll just broadcast the
Paul, I did like what you were saying about how what really was that you just focused on what you could do right now, because in business especially, that must have been so overwhelming. But to say, well, what is it we can do here, rather than panic and worry about, like you said, what's going to happen globally. But when you made that decision, like, was it a like, because you're in business, it's so far different from what I do. But was it just kind of a very conscious effort to say that?
So I've been part of a program called the Strategic Coach Program, and over the last 15 years, they give you a toolkit of things. And one of the toolkits, I just basically had my entire leadership team go through an exercise that basically looked at like what's most important right now, and what's the next action you need to do in the next 3 months, and then more importantly in the next month. And we just managed to that. And we did the 3-month plan in, normally a lot of people will make plans and it takes longer. We did it in shorter. And we just laser beam focused on what we decided as a team was most important, and just got it done. And we just redid similar exercises as things have evolved.
Yeah, just constantly resetting, but focusing, I guess. And that's it.
Yeah, I think Steve Jobs once said, everybody gets up in the morning and does something when they get up. The difference between me and most people, he says, is I do one thing and they do many. So, so part of it was just focus. Right?
Yeah, remember, if you remember I'm just reflecting back on something that Ed was sharing with us a couple weeks ago. but he talks about, you know, these elements of a result, but he talks about one aspect was focus, the second was our endeavor, so our effort, but then the third element is also our fortune, right? Deva, he talks about that good fortune element. And I think many times when we're doing things, I think it's you know, it's very easy sometimes to look beside us or, you know, look around us to what if people are doing the same thing and compare. But I think often that element of fortune, you know, good fortune is forgotten in people's lives because, you know, and really is what differentiates many people's effort, because a lot of people put the same effort, if not more, right? And I think, you know, it's important to remember that piece, because then I think it, or at least it's helped me not to get overwhelmed in the comparison and sometimes get down about it as well. So I just was curious to hear from others in the group about what, you know, this question of letting go meant to them, and if there's anything that they want to share from their breakout room. Avantika, Stacy, Hiba, Rita, anything to share?
Sure, love to hear what others have to say as well. So Rita and I had a lovely connection. I think two perspectives that we identified were, the first is when you are, like this is what Rita, but when you're in the zone, the work itself becomes a reward. So when you're really doing something you're very passionate about, then that itself is something that's so motivating, that becomes a reward. And she's been, you know, in principalship and education and things like that. And many times there were points where there was no external motivation, and she didn't enjoy certain parts of it. But there were so many aspects of just, you know, being there and making a difference, that, you know, she just kept going. And the synchronicity of it is that she believes and understands that there's a reason she was in that, and there is some preparation for her next venture, which came out of it. So I love that. I love the way she kind of said that, you know, working in the zone, the work itself is the reward. My perspective that, you know, because I completely agree with that, I didn't want to just duplicate that. I also brought in another thought, another reflection, which is that sometimes this whole aspect of reward itself comes from a petty self, petty ego. And we see that it's just, you know, in the stage of development when we're younger, not just in age, but younger in our development, in our evolution, because some people I've seen even in their 70s, they continue to have this. But I work with a lot of the young generation, so I understand that the kids are growing up with a lot of pressure right now for validation, for approval, for a lot of things. So I think the small petty self, when you associate with that, you're seeking a lot of, you know, brownie points, badges, and things like that. It's something you need. It's kind of becomes like, you know, a sense of self, you know, in the hierarchy of pyramid of needs, tied in with your self-esteem needs, and even sometimes your love needs, because you need to feel part of a society or a social structure where you're seen as being like, you know, top dog or high up in the pecking order, some sort of status. But there comes a stage in evolution where you start dissolving that ego side and not identifying with your petty ego side, and then you become the reward. You're not the contender, you are the prize. You become the reward, and you connect with your self-actualized self, your highest self, your wisest self, and you realize that, you know, everything is perfect exactly the way it is. And there's nothing that you come into an attitude of gratitude, you come into an appreciation of all that you have in life, and all that, you know, the synchronicity, which, you know, the dots in your life have connected to bringing you to something that is so much bigger than anything that you could have smallly asked for yourself. So yeah, so those were some things. We had two models. One is that of my father, I saw, who has been a brilliant soldier, a brilliant citizen, and never really got his due at the workplace, perhaps, but has such love in his life right now from his family, from his grandkids, from his kids, so much respect from everyone, you know, around him. And I think that to me is also a life which is very richly rewarded. And in my own way, I kind of felt that there have been times where I have been very richly recognized, which haven't felt so meaningfully rewarding. And there have been times where there has been nothing except for an echo of knowing that one is in alignment. And that itself has been such a rich reward that, one is able to make life-changing decisions about leaving countries, leaving opportunities, sacrificing, your personal relationships and lives, making really big, big things, because that once you taste that, I think no other reward really can match up to that.
Yeah, Avantika, thank you for sharing that. I was just that, making the action or the reward in itself, it's really important to do that. I have some thoughts on to kind of what we need to do to get to that point, because it's, what you're speaking of also is sometimes not easy as well. But I just wanted to hear if anyone else had anything to reflect on what Avantika said, or anybody else.
So yeah, so
Or Stacey, go ahead.
Hiba, do you want to
go
talk
ahead.
about your?
Sorry, I missed
go
your
ahead.
hand, Hiba.
Yeah, I missed it too. Yeah, so Hiba and I had a great conversation, and I think letting go of the fruits is a lot about, we tend to think that we're going to have a specific result, right? And then we move toward that, but maybe the fruit that we're thinking about is actually much smaller than it could be, right? But by just focusing directly toward that fruit, right, we're missing out on just all the the universe, right? That faith, right, that can come, or God, however we see it, right, that can come and just bring us opportunities that we wouldn't have thought of, or along the way, maybe there's actually, we think we have to follow all these steps, but there's this huge shortcut, right? Somebody that we would meet or whatever, or anything, right? That if we're just moving directly toward this result, we don't even see it, right? We're moving too fast. And then we're not enjoying the journey along the way. So we talked about really the aspects of needing to have, faith, patience, to really learn and enjoy the journey, and then perseverance, right? To keep continuing, taking those steps forward, even when, at times it feels like there's no progress being made, right? But just continuing on and persevering despite that, and just enjoying the journey, having faith that, that fruit out there, we can't totally see what exactly it is, but it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Stacey, I just wanted to comment on something. Isn't it interesting that sometimes we put so much effort in one direction to perhaps go in a certain direction, and maybe it hasn't worked out the way we thought it was going to unfold. And then something comes that's completely out of our control and brings us even further than where we thought we were going to go.
Absolutely.
And again, it's just that interesting piece that you're talking about, that, I always find that when we can put something out there, the real juice and excitement of life is seeing the magic unfold in a way that we, won't, necessarily have it depicted in our mind. But to me, that's always the real excitement of life.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I really, really connected with that. Hiba, please.
Yeah, I want to add just one thing to what Stacey was saying. And there's a methodology I was using, in all, just to enjoy this path. Reaching to the fruit that I want, and with the consistency and with everything we're doing and the hard work, there is in parallel something really interesting I learned to do. It just, I put I gather information, pictures and everything. And I try to do my meditation on it with a certain kind of music that I keep on repeating and repeating by seeing them visually and memorizing them. So it's a kind of thing that come to your mind, and then it's, I don't know, but things happen after that. So they have this positivity of the universe, but I know you're praying, you're thinking, so you're seeing stuff, you're imagining them, and they are happening by doing this kind of meditation. I'm not able to transmit, to give the concrete example, but it's sometimes ideas, pictures, and things you do, like your movie, what you want to where you want to go, what you're seeing, and you keep on seeing them, meditating on them, and working in parallel. It's, it's two parallel ways. You don't live just for the universe. You need to think of it, pray of it, I don't know what to do, and in the parallel, hard work. And whatever things is, you go and up and down. And as Ricken, you said, sometimes it's taking more time to reach there, but you can reach it. Might be the fruit is smaller or a bit different, but you're enjoying it. And you reach this fruit.
Yeah. Yeah, Hiba. I mean, to Stacy and Hiba, what you were saying is that smaller fruit, it's for myself, it's just being, that mindset of being open or happy with the 1% gain. Sometimes we're doing something and we're trying to hit the home run, right? But being able to feel that 1% for me is really that also, at least for myself, has taken some training and some practice, because again, when we see, I always talk about, when we see the outside world, it's the iceberg effect. The iceberg, only 10% or 20% of an iceberg is above water. 80% of that iceberg is below water. And it's so often, just being satisfied with that small 1% is again, the reward in itself. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Did anyone else have anything else?
Just being just near this iceberg, when you're focused and you're just near it, so you see more and more than 80%. So you will know how to work more and what to do during this journey. So things will become easier than being, just you're zooming in more and more.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I just wanted to read just a short excerpt from the book on what Simon was saying about letting go of the fruits. He says, letting go of the fruits means shedding our attachment to a particular outcome and opening ourselves up to whatever life returns to us. So that was, what his thoughts were on this, what letting go meant. And, I think it's important to mention, because in the second part of this chapter, he brings back this character of Dhritarashtra. And he says that Dhritarashtra symbolizes our own deep-rooted attachment to the fruits of action, our clinginess to outcomes. It says how significant that the Gita itself begins with a blind emperor and his paradigm of attachment, his mental captivity. Attachment gives rise to zealous attitude of I and mine. But as soon as we introduce this egoic idea, it leads to competition and conflict. This sums up tragic circumstances that led to the battle of Kurukshetra. So I just wanted to, bring this up because I think it's important just to identify and isolate the elements that help that make letting go of the fruits difficult, because he further then goes on to say, where perceived interests, the egoic I and mine lead to rivalry, jealousy, greed, deceit, exploitation, fear, hatred, and ultimately war. The conflict of Kurukshetra is not just an external battle, it mirrors the internal conflict of turmoil within Dhritarashtra himself. It represents a battle within each of us, a battle we're sure to lose if, like Dhritarashtra, remain blinded by attachment. And so I wanted to, just for us to reflect on this and just think about potentially, how do we visibly, I was just telling Tiffany in our group that sometimes it's easy to say, okay, we've let go, but, that quality of patience constantly has to, we have to remind ourselves, at least that's one of the qualities I think about to overcome these attachments, is just continually exercising patience, which is, for me, like I said, I always, in this group, I said is a virtue because it's easier said than done. Anyone based on anything that was just shared or read, anything to reflect or share? Yeah, please, Stacy.
So I think this is what you need to do in entrepreneurship, right? Like you talk about being willing to fail or really just, it's really more about finding something that doesn't work and quickly
Oh, Stacy, you muted for a second.
Oh, yeah, I think I hit something. But it's about really being able to quickly pivot if something isn't isn't working, because you know you're kind of going toward this vision as opposed to something specific. And so I think it helps some of that humility, like avoiding being attached to, I've got to do it this way, and just keeping going. And even though it's clear it's not working, right? I think some of that humility and that attachment, right? If you can let go of that, it allows you to then go more with the flow of what really can work, and see that and change.
Yeah.
And iterate.
Just building on that, I was thinking that, you know, that ability to pivot sometimes, at least for myself, it's been hard to know, like, do we keep treading the course, or do we pivot? And that sensitivity is really important in that instance. And just practically speaking, that's where for myself, and I know for many others, having some sort of either meditation practice, or we have to have like a system by which we're also cultivating sensitivity, because that sensitivity, I feel that's what differentiates, you know, that's what differentiates everyone, really. It's that sensitivity of know when to keep the course and when to pivot, because it's not always, at least, you know, I found it's not always so clear, but we need a system of developing that sensitivity. And, you know, going back to the models we've shown of having, you know, mentors, you know, like-minded seekers and wisdom texts to turn to of, okay, like, when's that pivot point, and when's that, okay, continue the course point, right? So that sensitivity factor, I think, you know, again, it's just adding to what you were saying of, because it's not always, at least I found, straightforward.
For sure. Well, it's intuition, right? It's following your intuition, or what's maybe your inner voice, that tapping into the all knowing, right? To infinite knowledge, right? To be able to do that. If you're just on the surface, self-fluttering around, it's very hard to get down to that level.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you.
Something else that came to mind was Gabby Bernstein often says, you know, forget what you think you need, and remember that everything's working out for the highest good of everybody involved. Because sometimes we're at a point where maybe we're ready for whatever it is, but whoever else is supposed to be working with you, or they still are on the journey, and they still have things to do, and like we do as well. But sometimes it's not about us, and kind of remembering that everything's working out for the highest good of everybody, and that forget what we think we need, like being open to whatever else is coming into our life, because maybe again it will bring us to what we need, or what we ultimately are supposed to be doing, if we have that detachment to it.
Yeah, it's a really important thing to remember, Rita. And sometimes I'm sure you'll notice it's hard for people to swallow in difficult times. You know, especially if we look at the last year and a half, to think that, you know, so much of what's happening is, you know, for potentially a greater good. It's sometimes hard to appreciate in the moment, but a great reminder.
Something to say.
You
know, the love what Rita said, because I've heard this term thrown about a lot, divine timing, as if things are, you know, outcomes are a factor of time. But I've heard somewhere else something which made so much more sense about divine alignment. When things are correctly and perfectly aligned, that is when something happens. So reducing one's dependency on the timing and this thing, and just understanding that, you know, we're a small cog or whatever in a big cosmic scheme, that's just amazing. Another aspect I wanted to bring up right now is about learned helplessness and despair. When someone isn't rewarded for a really long time, because one aspect of the statement about detachment from the outcomes is about, hey, you know what, have patience and things like that, and don't take things to your heart. But the other aspect is also to bulletproof yourself from, chronic disappointment or chronic despair, because that is also something that's very wounding to one's soul and to one's well-being. So there's the other aspect of detachment that I wanted to bring up, is that it's so important to bulletproof oneself from pinning one's self-worth on an outcome of anything. And just to kind of, this thing. There's this poem that I was just looking up with, I'm sure everyone's read this, but I want to read a couple of lines from this. It's by Rudyard Kipling, If, and it's his poem that he's written for his son. It's a long poem, so please, I'll put it in the group, you can read that. But the two lines that I'd love to read right now. So this is Rudyard Kipling, who's written this for his son as parenting advice for what it would take to be like a model person, model human being. And the two lines are, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. And then he goes on to say, if you can make one heap of all of your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and loss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on, and there is nothing in you except the will which says, hold on. So I just thought it's a very beautiful way to kind of poetically describe what we're saying spiritually.
Mm. Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, if you could share that poem, it would be great. Or the larger poem if it's online. Thank you. So we're just going to move on because there's a couple more things that I wanted to chat about. This was a really great discussion. But I wanted to talk about a dilemma that Simon brings up in this chapter. And I think it's worth just touching upon because this dilemma of, the question is there, but why is not caring or not being committed so often confused with letting go? And I think, I'm not sure if people have ever thought of this before, but he specifically addresses this, this point that letting go and not caring or not being committed are not the same thing. But I found, that, when we're trying to navigate this space of what it means to let go, that sometimes that this can happen. I've seen this within myself in the past, but also within others. And I just wanted to get people's thoughts or reflections on this point here that Simon brings up. Did anyone catch this line in the chapter?
So I had a thought.
Please.
Rick, and I think we expect that life should be hard and that we need to work really hard and that we need to just be really focused on an outcome, right? So it's hard to understand that actually in letting go of some of these attachments, we can actually do a lot more, right? Because we think that being stressed and being really busy and all this, we think of it like a badge of honor.
Right. I see it as like those, those times of difficulty, again, like I always say, like we all have a story that will break your heart, but what differentiates everybody is how they process that story. Because there's some people that go through that have this, that the repeated incident happens over and over again because things like the lesson that should be learned hasn't been learned or fully ingested or digested. But so I see challenge is definitely like gatekeepers for, future evolution. But one of the things that he had mentioned in this chapter of when he was saying that letting go of the fruits is not the same as not caring or being committed. Rather, it means living with a strong purpose and commitment and being open to whatever the results of what might come to us. And I think that was just a really important point that he had shared was having some sort of anchor, right? Anchor in the storm of letting go of the fruits. So again, just saying it is quite easy, but when he talks about purpose, I think about like having a value system or some sort of values. And Hiba really alluded to this, is having some sort of, a value system could be that certain visual or aspiration or whatever quality or thing that keeps you going, but having something to anchor ourselves in the midst of letting, that process of letting go, which, because I think apathy is a natural tendency of potentially letting go in a kind of a less evolved way. And people can share if I'm not making sense, feel free to chime in. But does anyone have any thoughts or comments on this?
Yeah, I think a lot of times passion is confused with commitment, and they're not the same thing. One can be very passionate about things passion is it's a variable or a factor of your emotional attachment to something. And it's possible to be very passionate about something without being attached to it, but it's also mostly true that you're passionate about things that you're very attached to. And we see this about, we see this when there's passionate debates about in a game as to who's going to win, or when the elections come up, which party, which side you're on, or whenever there is an attachment to an ideology, attachment to what you believe your worldview is, attachment to what an outcome, attachment to a family member, attachment to codependency, to whatever. It is, and we see this with people who've held very high position ranks and they retire and they have to kind of go back to being like everyone else. You see this sense of themselves which is lost. So a lack of commitment is not the same as a lack of passion. Commitment is not a function of your passion, according to me. Commitment is a function, according to me, of your alignment with your purpose and with the meaning and the reasons for which you are doing a particular action or taking a particular thing. So it's an aspect of your journey, your overall journey, not any one aspect of it. It is an aspect of your thorough grounding and understanding of why it is that you're doing what you're doing and the reasons behind it. That is where commitment comes from, and not what the outcomes will be, but who the outcomes will impact. That, I think, becomes a really strong anchor for your thing. So for instance, one of the questions that in Evolve XP they asked about about the vision. The first thing is like, what it is that what you hope to achieve out of this whole thing, and who do you wish to impact? So to me, it's a little bit, commitment comes from those anchors rather than from how invested you are in the result.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And again, just going back to that piece, I feel like that point here of strong purpose and connecting with that on a very regular basis is really important, not to develop this sense of apathy or not caring along the way. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Avantika. Anyone else had any comments or thoughts to share on this?
Just one last line before I shut up is that the Dalai Lama calls one of the tenets of his values is karuna, which is compassion. And he doesn't call it, compassion as being excessive caring about something, but he goes on to qualify it as being something that is detached compassion. So not compassion where you're losing yourself or getting invested in who it is that you're caring for, but a complete detachment of that whole process. So I just thought that that's something that's similar to what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was just reading, if people have heard of Thich Nhat Hanh, he's a Buddhist monk, and many people consider him the father of mindfulness. He has a line here: letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free. So it was just this was written in the context of trying to let go of not only feelings but also possessions that also might, physical possessions that make that element of letting go. Usually the physical sometimes triggers the mental or the internal. So I thought that was just a nice point to add as well. Hey, Enver's just joining us. Thanks, Enver, for joining us.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I just wanted to finish off the section today with just discussing some of, I just always try to summarize some of the advice that's given in the chapter. And if we see here, Krishna's advice on letting go, he has, the first is shed our attachments to a particular outcome. So that's the first point that we've talked about. Again, focusing on those attachments. And I think sometimes just identifying and labeling the attachments is really helpful to do that. The second point that he makes is being in this world and not of this world. And I thought this was a really important point because Simon, he specifically makes this point here that non-attachment is not that we should own nothing, but nothing should own us. And that's what reminded me of this advice here, is that, it's no problem to have things, but again, it's how we use these things that really make a difference. And I think speaks to this point of not being of this world. The third point that Krishna mentions in this chapter is devote ourselves to the cause, but not the fruits. And again, that's come up multiple times in our discussion today. Then a few other points is do your dharma and make it an act of service. So again, the first part of this chapter was identifying, being true to our nature and being okay that what we're doing is different than others. That's not a problem because, the world is forcing us to be, to flow with the masses. But really trying to identify what's, being true to ourselves and making that an offering and an act of service is really an important element here of this letting go. The next point is focusing on how you do something rather than what you are doing. And I thought this was a really great piece of advice here from Krishna in this chapter of Karma Yoga, but focusing on the how, and how Simon elaborates. He says that this is really going back to our intention that we have within ourselves. It's always going back to our intent and our motivation. And I think always revisiting and trying to refine that is always very helpful because it sometimes will, or many times will take us away from the physical action itself. And then the last point that Krishna makes on letting go is in the spirit of service, your best qualities will naturally emerge. So this was a question that Simon had asked one of his teachers when he had a doubt about, will I be lesser or less effective if I'm just always taking the spirit of service? And this reply comes that it's that in the spirit of service, your best qualities will naturally emerge. Oh, sorry, I'm just getting a little bit. So yeah, those were just some final points that I wanted to share. And then I think what I'll do is I'll leave this was a kind of a homework question, but in the spirit of wanting to, just come back to our purpose and re-identify, I just wanted us to take a moment. If people can just see the take-home reflection question for homework was just making a list of key values that that have or will ground our actions moving forward. And I think coming back and revisiting these values are really important because it speaks to this, the values, the purpose, and reminding ourselves of this. I often try to do this for myself because it keeps us satisfied, that element of being satisfied of where we are in the journey. And so just if everyone wants to take a few minutes to just carve out a set of key values they have for them. And again, this is that grounding or that anchor that I'm hoping everyone will take out of today's session. Any closing thoughts or comments that people wanted to share? All right. Well, this chapter, again, there's so much, so much depth here and everything that's said. But, we tried to bring out some of the key highlighted points. And the discussion today was just really, really like incredible. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, just hearing people's experiences and again, reflections on this area of letting go. I see it as like kind of a day-to-day practice that can be cultivated. You can't just wake up one day and say, okay, I've let go of everything. It's just always an evolution of so many different subtle things, attachments that we may be there. So again, maybe listing out some of those attachments and then the values that keep us going, I think could be really important for us for that anchor. Thank you so much, Stacy, for, again, always sharing what you share and, being here every week. Avantika, Rita, Enver, Christina, Ami, Paul, Hiva, really, really grateful for everyone's time and time together.
Thank you, Ricken, for leading the group. It's always a fantastic part of my week for sure. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul, and thanks to everyone. We'll see each other, everyone, next week, and hopefully Paul sooner.
Yes, that'd be fantastic.
All right, we'll be in touch. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.